In 1955, the average American farm kid was already 2 hours into hard labor before a single school bus rolled down the road. No alarm clocks needed. The rooster handled that. And if the rooster failed, your father's boot on the staircase did not. These were not suggestions. They were survival. Number 18 on this list left scars on your hands that lasted into adulthood. Number 7 is something modern parents would probably call Child Protective Services over. And number 3 required a level of courage most grown men today could not summon in daylight, let alone at 4:30 in the morning. These 25 chores built a generation tougher than anything America has produced since. Before we start, hit that subscribe button because this list is going to make you either proud of where you came from or grateful you were born later. Number 25. Lighting the kitchen stove. Before your feet hit the cold floorboards, the kitchen needed heat. Farm kids in the 1950s started every morning crouched in front of a cast-iron wood stove, twisting newspaper into tight rolls, and arranging kindling in a crosshatch pattern their mothers taught them before they could read. You struck a match, cupped the flame against the draft, and fed it until the kindling caught. Then you added split oak or hickory, adjusting the damper until the firebox hummed. The whole process took about 10 minutes if the wood was dry, 20 minutes if yesterday's rain had soaked through the woodshed tarp. That stove heated the kitchen, warmed the water, whipped out and cooked breakfast. Without it, nothing else in the house moved forward. By the time the iron top was hot enough to sizzle spit, your mother was already cracking eggs. But you had been awake for 30 minutes, hands black with ash, nose running from the cold. The electric range was available by 1952, but most farm families could not justify the cost when timber was free and children were plenty. That stove was the engine of the household, and a 7-year-old was its mechanic. Number 24. Hauling water from the well. Indoor plumbing was a luxury most rural families did not see until the late 1950s. The 1950 census showed that nearly 40% of American farm homes still lacked running water. So the first trip outside was to the well, sometimes 100 yards from the back door, carrying 2 galvanized buckets that weighed close to 40 pounds each when full. You pumped the handle until your shoulder burned, primed it with a cup of water kept from the night before so the leather valve would seal, and hauled those sloshing buckets back across frozen mud or wet grass, depending on the season. 4 trips before breakfast was standard. 2 for the kitchen, 1 for the washstand, and 1 for the livestock trough if the creek was low. That water was for everything: cooking, drinking, washing dishes, cleaning wounds. You learned fast not to spill a drop, because every drop meant another trip in the dark. Number 23. Feeding the chickens. The henhouse sat at the edge of the yard, and by 4:45 in the morning it was alive with noise. Farm kids grabbed a coffee can full of cracked corn and kitchen scraps, unlatched the coop door, and scattered feed across the dirt floor while hens pecked at their boots. You checked the waterer, broke the ice off the top in winter with your knuckles, and refilled it from the bucket you had just hauled. Roosters were territorial and mean. A good one weighed 8 or 9 pounds and could spur the back of your calf hard enough to draw blood. You learned to move with purpose, never turning your back. A laying flock of 20 hens could produce a dozen eggs a day, enough to feed the family and sell the surplus at the general store for about 40 cents a dozen in 1954. Those eggs were currency. Losing even one to a cracked shell or a missed nest meant money gone. Number 22. Collecting eggs. This was a separate chore from feeding because it demanded patience and a gentle hand. You reached under warm, irritable hens who did not appreciate the intrusion feeling blindly through straw for smooth, warm shells. Some hens pecked hard, others fluffed up and hissed. A few would not move no matter what, and you had to slide your hand beneath their full body weight. Eggs went into a wire basket lined with a dish towel to prevent cracking. Then you carried them inside, cleaned off any dirt with a dry cloth because washing removed the natural protective coating called bloom, and sorted them by size. Cracked ones went straight to the morning scramble. Clean ones went to the egg basket for sale. Your mother could tell by looking whether you had been careless. A cracked egg in the sale basket was a lecture you only needed once. Number 21. Milking the cows. The barn was dark and warm and smelled like hay and manure. You sat on a three-legged stool beside a 1,000-pound Jersey or Guernsey, pressed your forehead into her flank and pulled. The rhythm was everything. Squeeze from the top of the teat, roll your fingers down, release, over and over until the bucket filled with warm, foamy milk. A good milker could finish one cow in about 8 minutes. Most families kept 2 or 3, so you were looking at a half hour of steady work before breakfast. The milk went into stainless steel pails, then through a strainer lined with cheesecloth to catch hair and debris. It was cooled in the spring house or a water trough, then taken inside for cream separation. Barn cats lined up for the strippings, the last thin streams from each teat. You learned to aim the stream right into a cat's open mouth, and the accuracy became a game that made the cold mornings tolerable. Number 20. Mucking out stalls. What went into the cow came out the other end, and somebody had to deal with it. Farm kids grabbed a flat shovel and a pitchfork and cleaned every stall before school. Fresh manure was heavy and steaming in the cold air. You scooped it into a wheelbarrow, rolled it out to the manure pile behind the barn, and spread fresh straw across the cleaned floor. One cow could produce 50 pounds of manure a day. Multiply that by 3 or 4 cows, add in the horses, and you were moving a few hundred pounds of waste before the sun cleared the tree line. The smell saturated your clothes, your hair, your skin. You could scrub your hands raw with LYE soap and still catch a whiff during arithmetic class. Nobody at school mentioned it because half the class smelled the same. Number 19. Feeding the hogs. Hogs were loud, pushy, and always starving. The slop bucket sat by the kitchen door, filled the night before with potato peelings, stale bread, sour milk, and whatever the family could not eat. You lugged it to the hog pen and poured it into the trough, while 300-pound sows shouldered each other out of the way. Then you added a scoop of ground corn from the feed bin. Hogs could knock a child down without trying. You learned to dump and move, never standing between a sow and her food. A farm family might raise 2 hogs a year, one for selling and one for the smokehouse. That single hog represented months of feeding and care, and its slaughter in late autumn meant meat for the entire winter. Every scrap you carried to that pen was an investment in February bacon. Number 18. Splitting kindling. The woodpile was a farm kid's second office. Every morning you needed fresh kindling for the stove, and that meant standing at the chopping block with a hatchet, splitting dried pine or cedar into thin strips that would catch fast. The hatchet was real. The wood was real. The margin for error was about ½ an inch between a clean split and a trip to the doctor 15 miles away. Most farm kids started splitting kindling around age 6 or 7. By 10 years old, they graduated to the full-sized axe for bigger rounds. Your hands blistered and became calloused until the skin toughened into something that barely felt the cold anymore. Those calluses were badges. Every farm kid had them. Smooth hands meant you were not pulling your weight. First, pattern break. Here is where the list gets heavier. Everything before this point was routine. The chores ahead are the ones that separated farm kids from everyone else their age. These are the tasks that built something in you that gym class and homework never could. Number 17, carrying firewood to the house. Splitting and carrying were two different jobs, and the carrying never stopped. The wood box beside the kitchen stove needed filling before breakfast, again before school, and your mother expected it topped off when you came home. Each load was an armful of split oak or hickory, maybe 30 or 40 pounds, carried from the woodshed across the yard in the dark. You stacked it neat because a messy wood box was a sloppy child, and a sloppy child got extra chores. In deep winter, you might carry 6 or 8 loads before dawn just to keep the house warm enough to dress in. By the mid-1950s, the average American farm family burned between 5 and 8 cords of wood a year. That is roughly 40,000 pounds of timber cut, split, stacked, carried, and burned. And a good share of that hauling fell to the children. Number 16, checking the livestock water. Troughs froze overnight from October through March across most of the Midwest and northern states. You walked the fence line, checked every trough, and broke the ice with a sledgehammer or an axe handle. Sometimes the ice was 2 inches thick, and you had to swing hard enough to crack it without splitting the trough itself. Cattle would not drink from a frozen trough, and a dehydrated cow stopped giving milk. In the worst cold snaps, you hauled warm water from the kitchen to pour over the ice, then stood there waiting for the cows to drink their fill before it froze again. This single chore could eat 45 minutes on a January morning when the wind chill made your eyes water and your fingers stopped working. Number 15, harnessing the workhorses. Not every farm had a tractor in 1953. The USDA reported that nearly a third of American farms still relied on draft horses or mules for primary field work. Harnessing a team meant lifting a leather collar that weighed 25 pounds over a horse's head, fitting the hames, adjusting the traces, and buckling the breeching. The horse had to cooperate, and not all of them did. A green horse could pin you against the stall wall without meaning to. You learned to talk low and steady, keep your feet clear, and never approach from behind. The whole process took about 15 minutes per horse if everything went smoothly, 30 minutes if one of them was in a mood. And you did this in the dark, by lantern light, with frozen fingers that could barely work the buckles. Number 14, turning out the cattle to pasture. Gates had to be opened in the right order, or you had cows in the garden, bulls in with the heifers, or calves separated from their mothers and bawling loud enough to wake the county. You walked ahead, swinging a gate wide, then stood to the side as 1,000 pounds of beef shouldered past, close enough to brush your coat. Counting was mandatory. If you turned out 19 and the count was supposed to be 20, you went looking before breakfast because a missing cow meant a broken fence, a sick animal, or a calf coming early in a ditch somewhere. Number 13, slopping the barn cats. Every farm kept a colony of barn cats, not as pets, but as pest control. Mice and rats destroyed grain stores, and a good mooser earned her keep 10 times over. You set out a dish of warm milk, straight from the morning milking, and maybe some table scraps. The cats appeared from hay bales and rafters, silent and quick. You did not name them all, but you knew which ones were good hunters. A barn without cats meant a grain bin full of holes and a father in a bad mood. Number 12, gathering stove ash. The ash box beneath the wood stove filled overnight and had to be emptied every morning before the fresh fire got going strong. You pulled the heavy iron drawer out carefully, because live embers hid in gray ash and could burn through a floorboard or a boot. The ash went into a metal bucket, carried outside and dumped on the garden path, or saved in a bin for making lye soap. Wood ash was useful. Mixed with water, it made a cleaning solution strong enough to scrub grease off cast iron. Scattered on icy steps, it gave traction better than sand. Nothing on a 1950s farm existed for only one purpose. Number 11, priming the pump. Hand pumps lost their prime overnight, especially in cold weather when the leather valve dried out or the water table dropped. You kept a mason jar of water on the kitchen shelf specifically for this. Pour it into the pump head, work the handle fast before the prime water drained through, and hope the suction caught. Sometimes it took 3 or 4 tries, each one using up your saved water. If you ran out of prime water before the pump caught, you had to walk to the creek or the neighbor's well, which could be a quarter mile in the dark. A pump that would not prime meant the entire morning schedule backed up. Every animal, every person, every chore depended on water first. Second, pattern break. What most people do not understand about 1950s farm life is that these chores were not seasonal extras. They happened every single day. Christmas morning, you milked the cows. Sick with fever, you still fed the hogs. Snow up to your waist, you still broke ice on the troughs. The animals did not take days off, so neither did you. That daily discipline shaped an entire generation into people who simply did what needed doing without being asked twice. Number 10, sweeping the barn aisle. A clean barn meant healthy animals. Loose hay, spilled grain, and scattered manure attracted rats and bred disease. Before school, you swept the center aisle with a corn broom, pushing debris into a pile and shoveling it into the wheelbarrow. The barn floor was usually packed dirt or rough concrete, so the broom wore down fast. A new corn broom cost about 75 cents at the hardware store, and your father expected it to last 6 months. You swept with purpose, not because you loved cleanliness, but because your father could tell by looking at the barn floor whether you had done your job or just pushed dirt around. Number 9, checking fences. A loose wire or a broken post meant livestock in the road, in the neighbor's corn, or in the creek bottom. Every morning, part of the routine was walking the nearest fence line, looking for sagging wire, leaning posts, or fresh gaps where a deer or a wayward bull had pushed through. You carried a pair of pliers and a few fence staples in your coat pocket. Small repairs happened on the spot. Bigger breaks got reported to your father, who would fix them after field work. A boy who missed a broken fence and let cattle into the neighbor's wheat field learned a lesson about attention that lasted a lifetime. The neighbor did not sue. He came to your father, and your father came to you. Number 8, bringing in the morning hay. Livestock needed hay in the manger before they would settle down for milking. You climbed into the hayloft, grabbed a bale by the twine, and dropped it through the loft door or carried it down the ladder. A standard bale weighed between 40 and 60 pounds. You cut the twine, shook the flakes apart, and distributed them evenly among the stalls. The hay dust was thick enough to make you cough, and in late winter, when the loft was getting low, you had to crawl back into tight corners where the bales were stacked against the roof. Spiders, mice, and the occasional snake kept you alert. Hay was expensive, about $20 a ton in 1955. Wasting it meant wasting money the family did not have to spare. Number 7, handling the bull. Most dairy farms kept a bull, and most bulls were dangerous. Even a so-called gentle bull could turn without warning, and every farm family knew a story about someone who got gored or trampled. A farm kid's job was to make sure the bull had feed and water without getting inside the pen. You pushed hay through the fence rails, and you filled the water trough from outside. If the bull needed to be moved, your father handled it with a bull staff clipped to the nose ring. Sometimes your father was already in the field, the bull was out of water, and you had to make a decision. You moved fast, stayed close to the fence, and never turned your back. The fear was useful. It kept you alive. After milking, the fresh milk went through a hand-cranked cream separator, a cast-iron machine that spun at high speed to divide cream from skim milk. You turned the crank at a steady pace, about 60 turns per minute, for as long as it took to run the morning's milk through. The cream went into a separate can for butter making or sale to the creamery. Skim milk went to the hog bucket or the calves. A Delaval separator cost about $40 in 1950, a serious investment that a family expected to last 20 years. You cleaned every disc and gasket after each use because sour milk residue ruined the next batch. The machine had dozens of thin metal discs that stacked inside the bowl, and washing them was tedious, slippery work that nobody volunteered for. Number 5. Filling kerosene lanterns. Electricity reached most American farms by the mid-1950s, but plenty of barns, outbuildings, and remote pasture shelters still ran on kerosene. Every morning you checked the lantern reservoir, trimmed the wick with scissors so it burned clean without smoking, and filled the base from a 5-gallon kerosene can. The fuel smelled sharp and stained everything it touched. A smoking lantern in a hay-filled barn was a fire waiting to happen, so you learned to trim that wick perfectly. One lantern burned about 8 hours on a full reservoir. Families kept 3 or 4 going during morning and evening chores. The soft yellow light threw long shadows across the barn walls, and the hiss of the flame became the soundtrack of every dark morning. Number 4. Setting out the milk cans for pickup. The milk truck came down the road between 6 and 7 in the morning, and if your cans were not on the wooden platform by the road, the truck did not stop. You carried the full 10-gallon cans, each weighing about 85 pounds, from the spring house or the milk room to the roadside stand. In winter, the path was icy. In spring, it was mud. You learned to walk steady because a dropped can meant lost milk and lost income. The creamery paid about $3.50 per hundredweight in 1955. For a small family dairy shipping 20 gallons a day, that was the difference between paying the feed bill and falling behind. Number 3. Entering the hen house for broody hens. A broody hen was a hen that decided she was hatching eggs and would not leave the nest. She puffed up to twice her size, growled like a small dog, and pecked hard enough to draw blood from a child's hand. You had to reach under her anyway because she was sitting on eggs the family needed for breakfast. Some broody hens were so committed they would not eat or drink for days, losing weight and blocking the nest box from other layers. Your job was to lift her off the nest, collect the EGGS, and close her out of the coop for a few hours to break the cycle. She fought the entire time, wings beating, beak stabbing, claws raking. You were maybe 8 years old, reaching into a dark nest box at 5 in the morning, and something that weighed 4 pounds was trying its very best to hurt you. You did it anyway because eggs were eggs, and the family needed them. Number 2. Washing up at the pump. After 2 hours of barn work, you came inside caked in mud, manure, milk, ash, and sweat. The washstand sat by the back door with a basin, a bar of lye soap, and a towel that had seen better days. You pumped cold water into the basin, scrubbed your hands and face until they stung, and changed into school clothes. Your mother inspected your fingernails, failed the inspection, and you went back to the pump. There was no hot water unless someone heated a kettle on the stove, and most mornings there was no time for that. You went to school with hands that were clean on the surface, but permanently stained from work that started before dawn and would resume the moment you got home. Number 1. Ringing the breakfast bell. When every chore was done, when the cows were milked and turned out, when the hogs were fed, when the water was hauled, when the stove was hot, and when the eggs were collected, somebody rang the bell. It hung on a post by the kitchen door or from a bracket on the porch roof, a cast-iron farm bell with a pull rope that could be heard a quarter-mile across open ground. One long ring meant breakfast. 2 short rings meant trouble. That bell gathered the family from the barn, the woodshed, that to the pasture, and the pump. You sat down at a table loaded with biscuits, fried eggs, bacon from your own smokehouse, milk still warm from the pail, and preserves your mother had put up last August. You had earned every bite. You were 9 years old, and you had already done more real work than most adults do by noon. That breakfast was not a meal. It was a paycheck, a reward, and a promise that tomorrow morning the bell would ring again and you would do it all over. Nobody asked if you wanted to. Nobody checked if you felt like it. The animals were hungry, the stove was cold, and the milk truck was coming. So you got up. Try explaining that to a kid staring at a phone screen today. Not as a lecture, not as a guilt trip, just as a fact. This is what childhood looked like when the family depended on every pair of hands, no matter how small. Share this with someone who remembers or someone who needs to know. Drop a comment telling me which chore you did or which one surprised you most. And if your grandpa is still around, call him. Ask him about the mornings. He will talk for an hour, and every word will be worth hearing.